Hey, I'm Nicole. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm bringing you a video which at least one of you asked for, and it is a tour of my studio space. This is where everything happens. It's where I do all my sewing, most of my filming, and more recently, all of my knitting projects. So let's take a look around. This is the view from outside the room. Come on in. This whole area is where I do a lot of my staging and introductions to the video. It's just the space that you first come into. I've got a little mirror here so that when I'm doing try-ons or needing to do fittings or anything on myself, I just stand here in this mirror and do that. We've got a little area here with a futon. This was really a more recent acquisition last Christmas, actually, because we had the in-laws coming to stay with us and we usually give them our bedroom. So hubby and I got this futon. It folds out into a emergency bed that we can use when we have guests or when we need to stay here. Here I've got my little rails of my work in progress items. These are pieces that maybe I've just finished and they haven't quite made it into the wardrobe yet, or they are pieces that are being queued up for altering or refashioning or whatever. This is a recent dress that I made, but we need to do a little bit of repair work on the cuffs. You can see the organza did not survive. So I've got two little rails here where I keep all of my works in progress. This is a bit of a disaster storage zone here. That is an embroidery machine that I've got on loan with Singer in that box. And then I just shove away here anything that doesn't have a home anywhere else. So I've got a box here of machine knitting yarns, which I would like to get on shelves actually. I think one of the jobs I might give my hubby very soon is putting some more shelves up here, or possibly in this corner here so that I can put all my machine knitting wools and so on. Let's stay on this wall for now actually. Here I've got just some storage. I have a lot of materials. When I'm mid-project, I don't like to stop. I like to just have a lot of things to hand that I could possibly need. So I tend to keep a lot of the materials that I've bought over the years. Everything from jewelry supplies to trims to offcuts of things. The scrap pile is getting a little bit out of hand, I'll admit, but certainly trimmings, haberdashery, any jewelry supplies, beads, things like that, I tend to hold on to because I just never know when they're going to come in handy, and they have done. So here on this unit, I just have a few of my pattern cutting books, a few knitting books and things like that. This poor plant that looks like it's on its last legs. I cannot care for succulents, quite honestly. I've got my eyewear collection up there only because I've got no other space for it really. In these tubs, I have various things. Some are labeled, some are not, but some of them have fabric scraps and fabric swatches. This is my dedicated tinsel tub. I've got a whole tub here of different ribbings when I was in my sweatshirt making era. I've got two tubs which are for yarns and wools, and here I've got my wool winder in here. This one is more of the actual wool yarns. This one is some wool, but it's also synthetics and other fancy, strange. Oh, there's my flamingo. Which I was going to turn into a bag a couple of summers ago and never did. I've got three tubs of trimmings here, all my haberdashery trimmings. I've got rickracks and braids and all sorts of things. And a lot of these were accumulated over many, many years. One of the signature aspects to my jewelry design was using trims. I used to use a lot of trims, feathers, pom-poms, ribbons, cords, all kinds of things. It was almost a natural evolution that I would come back to sewing and garment design really after spending so many years in jewelry, because I think so much of my jewelry design was informed by my love of textiles and my love of trims. The idea with these was that this would be for non-dangly trims, so straight trims, bias bindings, rickrack, all that sort of thing. This was meant to be more fringings and feathers and things that had protrusions, as it were. And then this is a sort of overspill tub. I've got my pom-poms, I've got my cords and various other tassels and things in here. So these tubs are absolutely chocker. Years ago, I used to go to trade shows. Well, I used to do a lot of trade shows from back in my jewelry days. That's how I used to sell my jewelry to stores and boutiques. And then when I got more into sewing and fabric sourcing, I would also go to fabric trade shows, which not a lot of domestic sewers know about because obviously it's aimed more at industry. It's aimed more at fashion designers and people who are manufacturers, and it's where you buy wholesale basically. And a lot of these suppliers would send you samples if you requested them. And so I've got tubs of these fabric samples, and they're gorgeous fabrics, but only a sample amount of it. So I've got a few tubs of things like that, which I probably should destash at some point, honestly, because I don't know that I will ever use them particularly. And then here in this tub, is where I've got all my interfacings and some sewing tools and things like that. But largely it's interfacings and that sort of thing. More fabric scraps up there. And like I said, that's my tinsel tub. That's just a tray. I don't think that's had anything in it. Up here, I've got a few jars of just my sewing tools and supplies. I've got my pattern weights, sewing needles, all of my quilting and pattern drafting tools, like my rulers and so on, clips, buttons, garment labels, things like that. So that's where I keep a lot of those sewing sundry type things. Down here in these drawers, we have a lot of jewelry making supplies. These are my daughter's beads, really. These are the kind of things that she goes to and she likes when she's doing her jewelry making. I've got, well, just a few random things stashed here, but this is, again, more jewelry supplies, more beads. I think these are more sort of crystals type things. These are my rhinestone crystals. I used to do a lot of crystal-based jewelry when I was starting out. I used to get all these cup chains and I would sometimes replace the colors in there with different colors. So you can see these are all rhinestone crystals I've got in, I mean, probably every color under the sun, quite honestly. I've got some semi-precious stones here that were hand cut from Jaipur in India. This is more rhinestone rondelles type thing. I used to use a lot of these types of spaces in my jewelry. It was just a way of elevating the pieces, really. I found that the more you added in, particularly if you're using a lot of textile-based materials like I was, like cords and pom-poms and things, it really helped to elevate the pieces and stop them from looking too crafty. They would really look a lot more refined and a lot more fashion when you would add little findings like this. So I used to have these, or I still have them, as you can see, in loads of different sizes and lots of different colors as well. Here we've got all kinds of Swarovski pearls. Again, many different sizes, many different colors. I had one particular collection where I used a lot of these Swarovski pearls. And again, this was the type of bead that would just come in handy to just have for various projects, really. There's more crystal pearls. This is some chains. I love these two drawers. These are beads that I had sourced a lot from Etsy, actually, and a lot of them are African beads, wood beads. This was when I was designing my Maasai collection. So I sourced a lot of beads, a lot of African beads on Etsy, and I absolutely love them. That collection was so close to my heart, actually. I'll have to tell you that story another time, but that collection came off the back of a pretty rough patch, really, with my jewelry making and my business and everything like that. And that for me was kind of like a comeback collection. And so I love these beads. They're so colorful. I just love how they just make everything look a little bit tribal. But again, with tribal, you have to also be careful that you keep elevating it so that it doesn't end up looking too crafty. So here we've got these African beads. Some of them are bone beads, things like that. This is one of my go-to bead tubs, actually, when I'm making things for myself. So yeah, loads of beads in there. Here we have got a lot of Swarovski crystals. So again, I used to do a lot of these crystals put into settings. I will say the materials that I used in my jewelry making were not cheap. Swarovski crystals are not cheap, especially when you buy all the fancy stones. And I would buy them wholesale. I would buy them in bulk. So it's one reason why my jewelry business struggled profitability wise. Well, certainly from my point of view, that's why I struggled to pay myself, quite honestly. After I finished paying everybody else, I paid my suppliers, I paid my staff, I paid everyone. And there was very little for me left at the end of it. So that was one big reason why I just had to quit and pivot. But I'll tell you that story another day. So here, more Swarovski fancy stones and crystals. These are actual beads. These are Swarovski beads. So they're not the fancy stones. They are actually beads that you string. And again, I've got quite a few different ones. This was more from my earlier collections, actually. I sort of moved away from a lot of this crystal beading after a while because it's a little bit ubiquitous, quite honestly. Here we have my seed beads and some bugle beads and things. Just like little beads. Now let me take you over to this wall here. This is really just a storage wall. I've got a few tubs up here which don't have homes elsewhere. I've got a tub of leather swatches, some very, very cool leather in there. Now that bra making supplies, this is something that has been on my sewing bucket list for the longest time. I've been wanting to get into a bit of lingerie making for a long time. I've made a couple of bustiers actually, so I don't think bra making is that far off, to be honest. It will come sometime. When it does, I will have some supplies, not a lot, but some. I went through a footwear era where I was like, I'm gonna make my own footwear. And I still have a fair few supplies from that era, random jewelry supplies, and then I've got packaging things in there like poly bags and so on. I've got a few tubs of, again, more sewing supplies. I've got all of my fancy elastics. I've got all kinds of embroidery threads in there. Again, from my jewelry era, I devised a technique with my jewelry where I would stitch really chunky chains together using embroidery threads, and that way I can infuse color and just make the pieces feel a little bit more boho, which was kind of my vibe. So I have a whole tub there of different colored embroidery threads. I mean, again, every color under the sun. That is just another random tub, I think, of some jewelry packaging and things. Then I've got what is a pretty modest fabric stash, really. I used to have a lot more of this, as many sewers do, but I pared it back a lot over the years. I did a lot of de-stash sales over the years, and this is what I'm left with. A lot of them are very specialty fabrics. We've got hand-woven kente fabric from Ghana. We've got some Palestinian keffiyeh. We've got South American fabrics, African wax, that is Uzbeki silk velvet fabric, and obviously my tules and fancy fabrics up there. I just find it useful to keep that small stash of fabrics because sometimes I'm working on a project where maybe I just need a little piece for a lining, or I need a little piece for a collar or cuff or something, and it's just handy to have a stash of fabrics that I can use as and when I need something like that. Then on the lower shelf, I have my iron. I have some packaging stuff. When I'm doing my knitwear repairs and things, I will package up and send things back out to customers in those envelopes. And then I've got a few just filey bits of things. And then these are my sewing patterns. I have got some commercial sewing patterns, but you can see most of my sewing patterns are self-drafted. It's the Pareto principle, isn't it? I probably use 20% of those patterns 80% of the time, but it is quite handy to have. And then I've just got a little pin board here for just literally holding and pinning things that I just need to be able to access at some point in time. I've just got my pattern drafting papers there. Then we have my wall of jewelry findings. Findings is the jewelry making term for the little bits and pieces, the little accessories that you need when you're designing jewelry, like clasps, if it's necklaces or bracelets, jump rings, which you use to connect things to things. For earrings, there's all kinds of earring findings, you know, the things that actually clip into your ear that then you attach to beads, all kinds of stuff. So over the years, I've obviously accumulated loads of jewelry supplies, but honestly, they do come in handy. I have got jump rings in every single size, from 3mm all the way to 10x8 ovals in both silver and gold. I have crimp tubes, charms, all manner of clasps, crimp covers, metal discs, metal beads, head pins, all kinds of earring findings, cord ends, spacer bars, ribbon ends, every single possible thing you could ever need to make jewelry, I have it. And then this is my desk where a lot of the magic happens. This desk obviously serves a lot of multifunctions. It's where I sew, it's where I do any computer admin, it's where I do my knitwear repair. So this is where I spend a lot of my time when I'm in my studio. I've got the cutting mat out at the moment because I've recently been doing a lot more knitwear repair. I've got my knitwear repair kit over there, and when I'm doing my knitwear repair, I will do them on this little mat. Just a nice little surface to work on, really, and also for filming. But when I need to be doing any sewing, I will put this mat away. I will get my sewing machine down, and this is where I will sit and sew. I have got 3 machines currently. This is the one that I used day to day mostly. It's the Singer Heavy Duty computerized one, 6805C. I love this machine. It's such a workhorse, and I've been using it for quite a few years now. I've also got the Singer Heavy Duty Overlocker, and that one back there is the same Heavy Duty Singer, but not the computerized one. It's the manual one. For full disclosure, I am a brand ambassador for Singer. I have been in partnership with them ever since I came off the sewing bee. I absolutely love the team at Singer. And it was a natural fit for me because I grew up with Singers. My mum had a Singer, which is the first machine I taught myself to sew on. And then when I moved to London years later and I finally bought myself my first sewing machine, it was a Singer. And so it just made sense for me to partner with them. And I've been really happy with them ever since. So these machines were gifted to me as part of that partnership, for full disclosure. You will notice around the room that I have got various filming accoutrements, all manner of things that hold my phone in place. In fact, I've got my phone in one right now. In another video, I will show you all the different little filming setups I've got around the room and how I film my content. Over here is where I've got all of my sewing tools. Now, this was a very surprisingly useful acquisition. I got this in IKEA years ago. It was a very impulse purchase. I had no intention at the time of using it for anything to do with sewing. I don't even know if I was sewing at the time, but it has come in handy. I put all my sewing tools here. All these pots, actually, someone on my street was giving away. They were just outside someone's house. I think someone on my street is a potter, and this may be the old or failed pieces that they thought. So anyway, I've got all my tools in all of these different little jars and pots. I've got my sewing feet. I've got needles, buttons, crochet hooks, unpicker. That is my #1 sewing tool. Lighters, needles, marking chalks, scissors, tweezers, rotary cutters, pins, and these are all kind of random tools. There's the buttonhole chisel, there's a latch hook, there's a leather seam presser, there's a pointy thing, and then of course my pin cushion here. I do wear this a lot when I'm sewing. I love this. Back here I have my jewelry making pliers and things. Sorry, this area is not very tidy right now. I've got my friction pens, which are heat erasable pens that I use when I'm doing pattern drafting and things like that, or alterations. These are actual pens and markers. They're permanent, they're not heat erasable. And then I've got 5 mugs here with my jewelry pliers and things. Can get fancy plier holders and so on, but I think mugs work just as well, to be honest. So I've got them arranged here by snipe nose pliers, cove nose pliers. These are my cutters. These are crimp pliers. And then I've got my parallel pliers and things over here. This is something I need to fix, actually. This belongs in our bathroom. But she cracked and she's been in my to be repaired pile for ages now. Anyway, so I've got my tools all stashed under there on my desk. When I'm sewing, I will usually have this really cute little wooden bowl, which was a gift to me from a girl that used to work for me. Her parents were living in Africa at the time, and it's from Africa. I love it. When I'm snipping threads and things, when I'm sewing, I will just put the thread tails in here, and then once a day or however much I need to, I will transfer that into the bin below. On either side of my desk here, I have got several drawers containing all kinds of stuff, really. Here's some sewing supplies. These are all my bobbin threads. Usually when I'm doing a project, I will wind a bobbin and then I will just keep that thread there so that when I come to do another project and I've got to use another one of those colors, in most cases, I already have a bobbin wound for it. So that's kind of handy. Then we've got some more jewelry supply stuff here. Here we've got my overlocker threads and just some thread overspill. Here we've got a lot of my business packaging supply stuff. These are all business cards that I got from when I was doing all of my trade shows with my jewelry. Boutiques, stylists, buyers. I mean, this was my little black book when it came to my jewelry days. Now it's just a little relic, a little souvenir. And then down here, I've just got a few little bits and bobs, my printer cartridges, some rubbing alcohol, some double-sided tape, scissor sharpener, just random stuff, really. And then on this side, this is a lot of jewelry supplies. Actually, this is just some random camera type equipment. And then these are all the Swarovski stones. These are all the settings. More stone settings. These are all my Swarovski cup chains, crystals, all that sort of thing. I used to use this a lot in my jewelry making. So I have quite a few colors. And then here we've got more cup chains, kind of bigger cup chains. And then some more stones and various jewelry supplies. And then down here we've got even more jewelry supplies. We've got these cord end clasps and things like that. Some more findings and some more beads. But these are the more fancy beads. These are the ones that have all the pave crystals and things on them. A lot of these I sourced from my very last jewelry collection, which was my Armada collection. So that's that. Then we have my sewing thread wall. This little area gives me joy, actually. There's probably the most color there is in this room. I think a lot of people find it surprising that although I do tend to sew and work with a lot of color, the studio is completely white. And every now and then I think, oh, should I add more color to it? But I feel like I kind of need a blank canvas so that the colorful things that I am making that I do wear, that they take the foreground a little bit. But whenever I need a really colorful background, this one, it really is it. And then down here is my dog Maxie's little chill station. This is a chair cover, this green thing. At some point, a project on the horizon will be to make him an actual little dog bed out of that. Let me show you now around my cutting table, which also doubles as storage. Everything needs to double as storage. This is just 2 of these units with a tabletop on top. I have this fairly big cutting mat just on top of the cutting table so that when I am filming, or really more appropriately, just when I'm cutting things out, to be honest, because I like to use the rotary cutter wherever I can. It's just more efficient for me than using scissors. So I can just cut straight into this cutting table with my rotary cutter, and it's a self-healing cutting mat. So it's served me quite well, actually. I've got various things going on here. I've got an old sewing machine and some books. Here I've got a tub. I'm not even going to pull it out because it's so heavy. But down here I've got a lot of more jewelry supplies. It's chains and a lot of other jewelry supplies, but it's so heavy. Here I've got this, it's a laundry bag really. This is where I keep a lot of my Sustenta projects, my Sustenta Carnival projects. I've been collaborating with this project called Sustenta Carnival, which is run by a lady who is based in the UK, but she's Brazilian, and the project that she runs, Sustenta, rescues single wear Rio Carnival costumes that get tossed at the end of Carnival in the Sambadro every year. She rescues all these costumes and then finds a way to put them back into circulation. So I've been collaborating with her for a few years now, where I take some of the costumes and then create them into fashion. This is the tub I was using at the time to store a lot of the costumes that I got from the Sustenta project. Then we've got a random machine in here. This is my blind hemming machine, which I don't really use as much now that I don't do as many clothing alterations as I used to. I don't particularly need this machine as much. I mean, I could probably sell it in all honesty. And then down here, I've just got some just random shoving things in. There's some shiny shoe supplies, there's some camera equipment, there's varnish and glue and all sorts of stuff in there. Here's not very exciting. Here's just a tub of tote bags and big IKEA bags and things. And down here is more jewelry. These are where I keep a lot of my chunky chains and things. Again, I'm not going to pull it out right now because it's an absolute pain to get back in. I have to use my entire body force to get these tubs back in. They're really heavy. These are some work in progress things, some of my knitwear repair jobs that are just here waiting. And then on this side, which is not very easy to get to, but all of these black boxes and trays are my jewelry samples. Not all of them, quite a lot of them, but not all of them. So I designed, how many collections did I do in total? Several, many seasons. So these are a lot of the original samples that I made in my jewelry collections that I just store in these trays and boxes. Down here, I think we've got some old scraps and work in progress things. This is a raincoat that I started and haven't finished. And then yeah, just some random tubs of things really. Some shoemaking supplies again down there, and some knitting machine supplies, and again more jewelry stuff at the back there. This is a box of machine knitting yarns that I got recently on eBay. It's a massive job lot. I didn't really think it would be that much. I should have known, but when it came I was like, ooh, that's a lot. So I may rehome some of this, to be honest. It's a lot. I don't really need all of this, but it's just lying there for now until I decide what it is I'm going to do. And then of course, the most recent addition to my studio space, which is my knitting machine. So this is a space where I've decided to set her up just on the edge of the cutting table here. It does protrude a little bit. It's quite long, as you can see, but I wanted somewhere that I could have free access to. So when I'm doing my knitting, I will just sit here on this stool and then just use my knitting machine here. I've got the cover on now that I'm not using it for a short time because I don't want all dust and stuff to start getting into the bed of the needles and all that. But later on today, I will plan to do a bit of machine knitting. So I'll be taking the cover off and then we'll be able to access the knitting machine. My ironing board lives just there, as you can see. The iron, it gets stored up there. When I need to do any pressing or when I need to use the iron or ironing board, I will set the ironing board up along here and then just plug the iron in. And this is my little ironing station over here. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this little tour of my studio. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.